Welcome to episode 4 of the Wannabe Investors podcast. I'm co-host Mark Stevens. Today we have Hunter Pogo. Hunter is a 25-year-old entrepreneur from Minnesota who shares his experience land flipping.
So my name is Hunter. I have been doing real estate since I went to college when I was 18. And specifically now what I do today is land flipping, land investing. And I'm sure I can explain more of that as the conversation goes on. But basically what I'm doing is I'm buying vacant land and making some improvements to it, such as putting a driveway into it, leveling it out, maybe utilities, maybe putting like a dock at the property, something, whatever it is, just the least amount of money I can put into it, but improve the overall value of the property, just like you would with any other type of real estate. That's what I'm doing. And then I'm selling it for cash or on a contract for deed. And that's kind of like the premise of what I do. Like a little bit of my background is I'm from Minnesota originally, so I'm kind of close to you, Mark, up Midwest area at least. But I live in Vegas now, and I went to school. I got my double bachelor's in finance and marketing, and I minored in banking. I'm a realtor in Minnesota and Las Vegas. And yeah, kind of like the main thing though is just land flipping is the most unique thing about what I do. So it's like a little intro.
Yeah, and what actually got you into land flipping and in real estate? Like, was that somebody as a family member, a friend that got you into real estate, or was it yourself just YouTubing what to do?
It was YouTubing. At first, it was when I was in college, I started the entrepreneurship club. So I always had a bunch of cool people. We'd bring them in and they talk about how they started their business and how they got to where they were. And I was interested at the time in real estate, just from like YouTube probably. And I had talked to one of the people there. I was looking at buying a duplex and I didn't really know where to start. So I asked if he was like a real estate guy in the area. I was like, could you help me just like understand what I'm doing a little bit more? And he referred me to some other guy up in the area who was really good at investing in real estate. And I just started helping him with the mostly like cold calling. So I was cold calling properties for him, and he was wholesaling them and flipping them and long-term rentals. And so he was doing everything with it, but I was basically on the acquisition side, cold calling and marketing for him. And that's how I kind of got into real estate at first. And then how I got into land then later was I ended up not buying that duplex. Because at the time I was in college, so I didn't have too much money, but houses in North Dakota are cheap. So it was listed for like 92,000 or something like that. And I wanted to get it for like 80 something thousand. Couldn't agree. Hindsight, like the numbers are really small, but at the time it was a lot for me. So ended up not buying it. And then I came across a lake property that was for sale. And I bought that. Mainly I was going to buy it for myself just because it was listed at like a really good price. The owner of it was an investor in California. So I don't know how he came across it. I think he was flipping land at the time too. And because he was doing it out of state, he just didn't have a good handle on what he was doing. So I ended up getting a really good price on it. And I was going to build like a little cabin on the property was my idea for it. I found out later that the zoning didn't allow for that. And that's one of the big things when it comes to buying and selling land is figuring out what the zoning allows you to do with that property. So the minimum building size was 1,500 square feet, which I just wanted to do like a tiny house, like a 20 by 20 cabin type thing on the property. So I sold that property and I made about 30 grand off of it. And I was like, oh, wow, that was pretty easy. Like, all I did was I put a little gravel driveway in it and took good photos of it and marketed it well and made a lot of money on it. So I was like, okay, maybe there's something here. I did that again with a couple other properties, made money on those. Not as much as 30 grand, but I still made money on them. I was like, oh, that was really easy. I didn't have to manage contractors or go through a bunch of paperwork with anything. With land, it's pretty much just the purchase agreement that you're doing. so I was like, that's a lot easier to do. And I pretty much just took all the principles from wholesaling and flipping and all the business side principles from that, and I just started doing that with vacant land, and that's kind of how I got into it.
Okay. I think I'm gonna have to learn how to do this and work for you.
It's
Because yeah,
pretty,
yeah, that sounds pretty cool.
cool.
Huh? So how much did the gravel road cost you?
Yeah. So I did that myself, which was
Okay.
also kind of fun. Rented a tractor with like a bucket on it. I didn't know much about it. Still don't know
Yeah.
much about it. Probably going back, I would have just rented a regular Bobcat. But again, I was very price conscious at the time. So I didn't want to spend like the extra $200 for the Bobcat. So I just went with the tractor.
Yeah.
So it was about 200 or something to rent the tractor. And then it was about another 1,000 or so for the gravel to get dropped off at the property. And that was enough to bring me about 100 feet into the property. It was a little bit under 3 acres was the size of the property. So yeah, so it was about a little less than $2,000 to put that driveway in,
Okay.
and about a day and a half of my time to do that.
So what gave you the idea to do the gravel road and just not repost the land and just
Yeah. Well, at that time, I had not known that I couldn't put like a little cabin on it. So the first thing my thought was, is I bought the property. It's just vacant land. If I'm going to put something on it, I need to have access to it. So as soon as I got it, I was just like, all right, I'll put a driveway in it. I did that right away without even thinking about like kind of like the value add situation or anything. Cause again, it was just going to be for myself. And I wanted to do it as cheap as possible because I was still price conscious. And after I put it in, that's when I realized that I wasn't able to build on it. So I wasn't really thinking about the actual value add at that time. But now going forward, I can actually see where that value is very important because when you're selling vacant land, standing out from other pieces of property is the biggest like value add that you're going to have. And I can go over the value adds, but and I will. So basically, like the big value adds are zoning, like I talked about earlier, figuring out what the zoning is for that property. If it can be zoned for tiny houses, is that allowed? Can it be zoned for camping? So specifically, like up in Michigan, Mark, a lot of people probably have properties that they want to have like a RV or a trailer on, or go tent camping on. If they are allowed to do that, a lot of zoning doesn't allow you to do that. So finding the places that allow have minimum building size, and then like other cool things you can do are like if Airbnb is allowed. So like the more things that you have available to do with the property, the more valuable it is just off of that. So that's one value add. The other value add is those small improvements, like the driveway or leveling it out. And the reason that those are big value adds is if you're searching for Zillow or wherever you buy properties from, or if you're looking at land on Craigslist, um, especially in states where it's just like forested, or if you're out here in the desert, it's just like a picture from the side of the road of like a forest and some trees, and you don't really know what you're looking at. So for the marketing side of it, what I stand out doing is I have very good marketing. So I have really good pictures, I have videos, drone shots, everything. So somebody from their computer is able to see basically what the whole property looks like. There's a walkthrough of that property, there's drone shots, HD pictures, and that stands out from a lot of other people that are selling land because they just have a picture of some forest. So those improvements, when you have the actual driveway, one, it makes it look a lot better when you're listing for sale. And then two, when the people go and actually look at the property, they're able to drive into it. They can see, wow, this is like where we're going to put our tent up. This is where we're going to pull our trailer into, or this is where the house is going to be. And oh, here's like a nice access to the point to the lake that the property might be on. So it really sells the property a lot better if you do that. Yeah, those are kind of like the big value adds. It's
yeah,
pictures.
and
Yeah,
sorry, sorry, Mark. I have a bunch of questions on this right now.
yeah.
No,
The
shoot, let's go.
the zoning. How are you? Obviously, it's pretty easy to identify what the current zoning is, but how are you able to identify what you could maybe change it to if you wanted to change it to? Are you changing zoning at all to make it more attractive to buyers? How is that done, and how are you easily doing that?
Yeah, so there's a lot of different ways that you can flip land. You can subdivide, you can straight up flip it, you can work on zoning variances and changes like that. I like to keep it simple. I like to keep it easy, and I'm just buying in areas that have all the good zoning laws already. So to find those, basically, you're looking at the hierarchy of what you can do. So you're looking at the state level of what you can do in that state, and then you're looking at the county level, what every county allows you to do with it. And then below the county is the city/township. And then below that would most likely be the HOA, if there is an HOA or anything like that. So usually if I'm looking at buying an estate, I'm looking at first the county level. So I'm already picking out areas that I want to buy in. And then I'm looking at the counties that those areas are in. And there's a few ways that you can research it. The easiest way is basically just call up the county zoning department and ask, hey, I'm looking at buying land in the county. Can I do this, this, and this? Can I build on it? Can I camp on it? Can I Airbnb it? More in-depth questions, but most of the time they're pretty helpful in answering those for you. You can also Google it. A lot of the times the county website will have like their zoning restrictions online, or go into the actual zoning department at the county courthouse or whatever it is and look it up that way. But the easiest way is just to call them and figure out if you have like your list of questions. If you can do those things, then those are the places I like to buy. You can go through and do variances. So some places they might have a minimum building size, or let's say the parcel has to be an acre in size in order to build on it. Maybe you found a parcel that's 0.9 acres. You could then go and request a variance and go through that whole process to get the right to build on it. And that is like a way to add value. But that's just a headache, in my opinion. There's a lot of options where you don't have to do that, so I don't do it.
Got it. But have you in all of the parcels that you've sold, you haven't done one variance because it's just a headache?
No, I haven't.
What's the time frame on getting a variance and having it changed if somebody was considering doing a variance on the property?
I do know people who do it, and it depends on the county. If you're in some small county that's population 50,000 people or something like that, it's most likely going to be a lot faster compared to if you're in Los Angeles County. But so like the smaller ones, which the experience I have known people to do it takes 2 to 3 months. Basically, you're just talking to somebody at like the county level, filling out their variance form request, and then you go to a board meeting, and then the board kind of discusses and talks about if you're able to do it or not, and then they approve it or don't approve it. So it's not too hard. It's just you have to have the reasoning of why you're doing it.
And and when somebody does it, doing it the variance way, are you able to have a higher margin because you're buying it at a lower, because you may not have a desirable zoning, and then you change the zoning to a more desirable zoning so you could sell it for more? Is that how that, if you're doing that strategy, how it works?
Yeah, that would be that value add. The reason that I don't do it though is because you can still find deals in the areas that have favorable zoning. So like something like that would probably be better in more busy counties where there's less deals available. But just going back a little bit more into like what I invest in, I usually invest in stuff more in rural areas, just because there's less competition and you can get higher margins because there's less comparable properties sold to get a good market value at. So you're able to buy at the low end of the value and sell it at the high end of the value.
You're intentionally seeking out properties in rural areas. I feel like that's something that a lot of people would try to avoid.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I don't like to buy city lots. Like for example, here in Las Vegas, the reason I haven't bought anything here yet is there's a very limited amount of vacant properties. Like Las Vegas is kind of a bubble surrounded by a bunch of public land. So within that small bubble of Las Vegas, there's only so much private land that can be flipped. And because it's a small amount, there's a higher volume of it being sold. So there's more of a comp value where a parcel, you're probably going to be able to figure out it's worth about $20,000, or depending if you're on a better part of town, it's worth about $60,000, something like that. When you're in rural places, there's not as many comparable sales. So you're able to buy at the very low end of the comparable sale range and then sell it at the very high end. And that's where you're making your money, is the spread right there.
So my question is, how are you identifying what parcels are actually good to purchase when, if I was to look at a rural thing, I'm like, well, nobody's going to buy this land. Why would anybody buy this in the middle of nowhere, right? How are you identifying what parcels are actually good properties to purchase?
Mm-hmm. So the biggest things that I look for are, of course, you want to be in an area, even if it's rural, there's going to be attractions by it. There has to be attractions by it. So like look for nice lake properties. So like this doesn't work in Vegas or out west, but as you go out east and out north and even down south, look for stuff with lake properties. Maybe it's next to a national park. It's by a state park. It's by some sort of tourist attraction within an area where people would want to go to it. And again, when I say rural, it has to be within usually about a 2 hour limit is the best of like a major city. So if you're buying something further than 2 hours from the city, that's where it starts. You can do it, but the value starts to decrease a little bit because most people are looking at these type of properties as like a cabin or a hunting property or camping property where they go on the weekend, kind of like a vacation type property. And if it's more than 2 hours, people still do it, but it's just the value goes down on it. So I like to have that range of like an hour to 2 hours outside of a major city is what I'm looking for. So you still have that market that you're able to sell to, that city market. And there's also some attraction nearby. So if it's right next to a cool lake that a lot of people go to for the weekend, that's a good value add. There's a reason to go there. It's not just you're going 2 hours outside of the Las Vegas in the middle of the desert and pulling a camper up. Like there's a reason to be at that property.
Yeah, yeah. And what would you be saying? What's your turnaround on, from acquiring the property and then selling the property, and even like when you're searching for the property? I don't know what your marketing is to actually get these land contracts now, but I mean, you can go into that a little bit as well.
Yeah. So right now my average is about 90 days from when I buy it to when I sell it. And how I market to acquire the properties right now is direct mail. I used to have a team that would cold call for me, and I'd pay them commission based off of the deals that they bring to me. That cost is way too high because paying commission on each property when the deals are so readily available, like the amount of deals that there are with vacant land there's a lot. So direct mail works just fine where I don't have to actually pay somebody to do it. I can just send out direct mail to the property owners and then they come back to me as leads and we're able to qualify them that way. So direct mail still works for vacant land.
Okay. And like how many people would you be, or sellers would you be hitting in a month, and what's your marketing budget for the month on stuff like that?
So I have my own direct mail company now. It's directrei.com if anybody wants to get some direct mail.
Yeah.
But basically, I have a really high return rate for people who are interested in selling. And that's because I scrub my lists very well. So the people that are on my list are very likely to sell their property. And then two, just how I have my letters written and how they look. They invoke a high response rate. They're more personalized. They're not like a postcard. They're actually like envelopes with handwritten on the front. I have robot writers that write those on the front, but it looks like it's handwritten on the front, and then the inside of the envelope is a custom letter to them. So because of like all those factors, the scrubbed lists and the good letters, like I get at least 10% of people that are coming back to me interested in selling. 10% of those people are interested in selling at a price I'm not going to pay, but I get a high volume of people calling me back. So because of that, I don't have to send out too many letters. Probably like 1,000 a month. And with $1,000 a month, I get 100 people that are coming back to me, interested in selling, and then I can cut out a portion of those that are the best deals.
Damn, that's great. Mark, do you have a question?
Yeah, if I can sneak one in here. So are you looking anywhere? Are you looking just in Minnesota right now? Where are you looking currently?
I look in the Midwest overall, so like Michigan, Minnesota, Wisconsin are kind of like the big states that I do, and that's just because I'm from Minnesota originally, so I know the area better. I'm looking in Vegas. I don't see as many deals with as good of margins. I know for sure though that anywhere out east, especially like North Carolina, or if you go to Florida or any of those type of states, they have a lot of good deals. So that's probably next where I'm heading to, is kind of out east a little bit more. And I've also looked at California before. But again, the desert is kind of just a different game. That's where you can do a little bit more, make more money doing subdivision, buying big parcels and dividing it and selling it like that. So it's just kind of a little bit of a different game that I do. So I'm more looking to go out east, more of the future properties.
Awesome. And I have a question. How are you identifying the margin? How are you identifying the ARV for your parcels so that you know, like, oh, I'm going to buy it at this, I can make this? How are you doing that?
Yeah. So I'm looking at the comps on properties. So if properties are selling for, I don't think I've talked about my margins so much yet, but I look for stuff that is usually lower in priced. So if something is selling for about $30,000, that's like a market that I'd want to be in. So I'm looking at places like, I'll go on like land.com, or you can go on the MLS or Zillow or whatever it is that you're looking to find properties, looking for properties that are $30,000 approximately is what they're selling for. And then I know that if they're selling for 30,000, I'll probably be able to get them for $5,000 or $6,000 if I market to enough people. So I'm looking at the end price of what it's selling for, and then I'm going in reverse, and then I'm making offers under that. So like my current sales, like what I like to do, like my bread and butter, is buying it for $5,000 or under, and then selling it for $15,000 to $30,000. And those are the ones that I'm repeating the most. And then there's the ones that are one-offs more, where it's like a nice lake property, or it's like a bigger property, something like that. Those ones have different margins, where I'm spending more money. I'm spending more than 5K on it. But then it's also selling for a lot more. But more of the bread and butter is those smaller parcels. And the reason behind that is, when you're selling land, the bank doesn't like to finance that a lot of time. And if they do, the appraisal that they give you on that property is a lot lower than what I want to sell it for. So they're just not going to fund it most of the time. So the people I'm selling to, I'm either selling it for cash, or I'm selling it on a contract for deed. And with cash, not many people have, more than $30,000 just sitting around to go and spend on some land. And if I'm selling it on a contract for deed, I don't want the contract to be more than 4 years usually. So I usually do like 48 months or less. And then so those monthly payments come out to about like $500 or less if you're doing it for that long, that type of length at that price. So if it's at that price point, I'm able to sell it to the most people possible. Once you get into those higher price points, it sits for a longer time. And then you have more money tied up in the deal because you had to pay more money for it. And then it's sitting for a longer time. So I like to do the high volume with low numbers on properties. So,
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. Are you using your own money? And did you start with your own money, or are you using other people's money? How is that happening?
Yeah. So right now I still do all my own money. So I buy everything in cash, and then I sell it. And when I sell it, I'm carrying the note as well. So I owner finance it. But yeah, I use my own money right now. Something I have been working on is writing an investment proposal to use other people's money. But currently I just do everything in cash right now.
Okay. I might be able to help with that on the money side. Yeah.
Yeah. I've been too Dave Ramsey like recently, so I have to take a little bit more risk, but
yeah. We don't like David Ramsey over here. We like to be over leveraged.
That's fair.
Go
Have
ahead,
you
Mark.
kept anything for yourself yet?
Not really. It's kind of cool because I have a bunch of properties all the time. So I always have like some place I can go, especially in Minnesota when I go back, because I travel back and forth between here, there, and Vegas. So whenever I go back, it's if I ever want to go to a lake, like I have something at some time, but I haven't kept anything. I think if you guys know who Ben Mala is, he's a YouTuber, real estate investor guy. But I forget the quote exactly on what he said, but basically he said, look at everything as an investment, no matter what it is, like if it's your house or if it's your car, even whatever it is, as an investment. So that's how I look at everything now when I buy like a lake property. Like, oh, this would be cool. But it'd also be cool if I was able to sell it for $30,000 more than I paid for it. So, so I haven't kept anything right now.
Do you make any?
Have you lost
Go
money
ahead.
on anything yet?
I haven't lost money on anything yet, which is cool. I think it's just because I'm buying stuff for such low prices. Like if you're paying $3, $4, $5,000 for a piece of land, um, there's inherent value in vacant land and real estate. So it's hard to lose money on it. I just hold it pretty much until somebody's going to pay me the money that I want for it. But I haven't lost money on anything yet. And there's always too, if it's not
What,
selling, I can sell it
what's
under
the longest you've
financing.
had to hold something?
I think the longest I've held something is about a year and a half. So I held it for a while, but I also priced it really high because I liked that property. So that was one that I kind of priced high because I liked it. But if somebody was going to pay me that much money for it, then cool, I'll sell it. So I would have been able to sell it for a profit, just less profit.
And do you do any special kind of request on your properties if it's a property that you really like and would want to spend time at? Where if they bought it from you, you say, okay, well, the only condition is that I get to go to the property if I want to. You do anything like that anytime?
No, I haven't done that yet, but
Okay.
so I might maybe if I come across one of those.
Yeah.
Do that.
And what's been your biggest obstacle?
Biggest obstacles, I'd have to say, is there's always just like something that's going to come up, like some unexpected cost, or for example, if you're buying property, I've bought stuff at tax forfeit auctions before, and those are always different depending on the state you're in. And I've also bought properties from people who have bought it from tax auctions. And like an example of like one weird thing that came up is if somebody's bought it from a tax forfeiture in the last 10 years and they transfer it to you, and it hasn't been 10 years since it's been forfeited, then you have to go through like a proceeding subsequent with that property, which could cost a few $1,000s and a lot of time going through that process. And that's like something that you wouldn't really think of or know until you've actually done it. Because in other places it might not be 10 years, you might not have to do that. That's just like an example of like different things that like come up, and that's kind of like the major issues that I've had, just like weird things that I didn't even know were a thing that come up. But then I'd say for like friends and family and support wise, at first there's like, make sure you can sell it if you buy it. And I think after I've done it so many times, it's just kind of, they know that I can do it. So they've been supportive.
Do you have any other businesses or any other investments, anything that you're working on to make money residually or passively?
So I have the land flipping, I have the direct mail, and then that's pretty much it. I mean, I do other things. I can, whenever there's something I can flip to make money, I'll do it. If I can flip my car and make money off of it, I'll do it. But it's mainly just the real estate. Land is the big one for me.
Do you have any kids, wife, girlfriend?
No, I'm 25, so
Okay. Hey,
Still,
if people get married early, man, then they get divorced later.
not for me.
What's your next move? What are you planning to do in the next 6 months to a year? Do you have any changes in your path, your journey that you're thinking about or contemplating?
Yeah, the next big thing is definitely going to be leveraging other people's money. So like I said, I'm working on an investment packet, and I think that's going to be pretty big because I'll be able to offer pretty good returns to people, like more than the stock market, but where I'm still able to take a big cut of that profit because most people they don't have the ability or know how to flip land, and there's huge profit margins to be made in there. So I'm still able to offer good returns to investors, but then also still be able to take on a lot of profit myself. So I think that's going to be like the next big step for me currently, but it's all going to be land focused because that's my favorite type of real estate right now.
Got it. Let's talk after this.
Let's do it.
Yeah, because I can help you on that.
Cool.
Let's talk during this.
Have you had any legal things happen to you with owners or sellers or buyers?
Not yet. I think I'm pretty fair with people. I could see the only like big legal issue be with owner financing. So that's like the nice thing about selling on a contract for deed with land is there's nothing that can really get messed up per se with the property. If I sell it to somebody and they default on their payments, there's not like they're not gonna take the car and drive off and I'll never see it again, or it's not like they're gonna go, break all the windows in the house or something like that. It's just dirt. So there's not much they can do to it. Um, I could see that maybe one day that could be like a legal issue, but I'm pretty fair with people. If somebody's a month or two, or I've had people that are like 4 months late on their payment, um, I don't default on them right away, and I don't charge. I in the contract I have late fees built into that, or if they're late on it, but I never really charge them the late fees. I usually just work with people, and if they've got to a point where they realize that they're not going to be able to make payments, it's just like, all right, we're going to default on the loan and cancel it at this point. But I've worked with them for a few months already, so I'm pretty fair with them in that regard, where it's not just like, oh, you're late, this is day one, you're defaulting on it, you've lost everything that you've paid into it so far. I try to work with people on it, so I could see that being a legal issue, but I try not to make it an issue with anybody, so haven't had anything so far.
Cool. And do you have plans, or are you doing any type of mentorship for anybody that's watching that would like to start learning about this, or any resources for them?
I started a YouTube channel where I posted kind of like an overview video. So the best way to find that is everything's linked on my Instagram. So Hunter Pogo, Hunter Pogo. That has all of the links to everything. So I have a video, kind of like the overview of how to do it. And then later this week, I'm releasing more on the purchase side, more in depth on that, a video on that. And that's the best place right now. I also have like a short Word document written there, linked in the description. But yeah, I'd say check out my Instagram. All the videos are linked there. And maybe eventually I'll have like some sort of mentorship thing, but right now it's just got those videos up.
Okay.
And right now, are you working as an agent just for yourself and doing your own offers? Or are you representing any buyers or sellers on any other properties?
I just do it for myself pretty much. That's why I got it originally, is for myself. Um, Not to say I'm opposed to representing people, but I haven't put any effort into doing that right now. So I just do it for myself.
And what are you using to pull lists? You said you're really specific in the type of list that you pull. Are you using a specific online service? Are you using the MLS, or what are you using there?
Yeah, I like using it's an app called Landglide, and they also have a website version of it. But basically, what that is you create your own list. So I go through like the whole process of finding the area I want to buy in, checking with the county to make sure zoning's good, and then checking with the city and the township, make sure zoning's good. Once I've qualified all of that, I kind of have like an area, a geographical area on a map that I know anything in this area is something that I would be willing to buy. And then I'm looking at parcels that are generally 3 acres or less, because smaller parcels, you're able to have that spread because you're able to look at the value of them as being a little bit lower because they're smaller parcels, but then you're also able to market them because it's real estate and land. So you get the best spread pretty much for smaller parcels. So once I've gone through like that whole process of figuring out where I want to buy it, Landglide, it's just like a parcel map, and you can go and click on each parcel that you would be interested in adding to your list. And as you click on it, it adds it to your list, and you're able to export that to a spreadsheet. And that's how I do it right now. Is I like to look at each parcel that I would individually buy, because I'm only doing 1,000 a month of letters that I'd send out, so it doesn't take too much time to go through and click on that. And I go and I click on each parcel that I'd want to add to my list, and then you're filtering it for people who live in that area. So if somebody lives out of state, way more likely to sell it, or if they live far away from that property, way more likely to sell it. Especially if somebody owns a house on one parcel and the next parcel over is vacant and they own it, they're not going to sell that because it's pretty much just an extension of their property that they live on. So filtering out for that. And then those are like the main things I'm looking at. But then you can also go look at people who are delinquent on their taxes. Look at a few other things, but mainly it's just those few things. It's looking at all those different filters to figure out where I want to buy in, and then where the owners are located. And then from there, Landglide, you can export that list and direct mail everybody from that list. And that's what I do.
Awesome. And
do you mess with anything that's on market?
I haven't bought anything on the MLS. That first property that I bought was on Facebook Marketplace, so it's kind of on market. It was also actually on an auction site. It might have been on the MLS. I'm not positive actually, but it was a really good price, and that's why I bought it. But that's the only one. Everything else has been off market or from the county tax forfeits.
And how are you finding your buyers?
Yeah, so because I've been doing it for a few years now, I have a pretty good buyers list built up. And those people that are on the buyers list get an email right away with those properties. But before that, and what I still do now, is Craigslist and Facebook Marketplace are the best places to list it. So do it there. And then if a property doesn't sell for a long time, then you can throw it up on the MLS. That's kind of like my last resort. But I just prefer to not do the MLS because it's more paperwork and it takes a little bit more money, a little more fees on top of it. But Facebook and Craigslist are great for land.
Awesome. And what's your day-to-day look like? Like on a day that you're sourcing and all that type of stuff, how much time do you spend on this type of stuff a day, a week?
Yeah, it doesn't take too much time, and I kind of do it in waves. So I'll have a wave of me looking at properties, adding them to the list, and then it's a wave of having those properties mailed out. And next wave would be getting those inbound leads. So people are interested in selling, and then it's me sorting through those leads and buying out of that pool. And then it's repeating that process. And I like to do it in that kind of wave process because then I'm buying an entire area at one time, instead of just continually doing it. I like to do like an area at a time, so I know that I've got the best deals in a certain area, and I'm also able to price them accordingly. I kind of control the market almost a little bit, where if I have 5 or 6 parcels within a square mile, I can kind of price those all within different prices compared to each other. So that's kind of like the process that I go through. Is it takes about a couple weeks for each of those processes to go through.
Okay. And who's your typical buyer, you would say? Are the people looking to build homes or do other things with this property? And also, I have an interesting question. Is there ever a time that you could possibly lease this land and they do something on it and you make, some cash flow like that?
Yeah. So for your first question, for like my typical buyer, it's kind of like two main people. There's high income and low income. So the high income is going to be people who are buying these lake properties or second properties and building a cabin on them or doing some sort of building on that property. And those are typically people who live in the city and they have a lot of money and they're building a second property. Whereas the lower income buyers, and all these people are usually end buyers. Um, Again, there's different land games you can play where with other ones you're selling to developers, but I'm usually selling to end buyers. So the other case then is the low income buyers that I'm selling to. And those people are generally buying it from me on a contract for deed. And it's for people who couldn't afford like a cabin or they couldn't afford uh, a second property to go do stuff on. But because I'm offering them it on a contract for deed for 3, 4, 5, $600 a month, that's a lot more affordable for most people. That's kind of more like a car payment or something that they're paying to me, and they're able to afford that, or they generally wouldn't be able to. And those people are going to be using it for most likely camping, and they look at it as like a long-term investment. As in maybe 5 years, their income will be higher, and they'll be able to build a cabin on that property. But those low-income ones are generally going to be the contract for deed buyers. And I've also had people who just put that as their full-time residence, where they buy it. Maybe they were living in a trailer park before, and they're paying $600 in lot rent to live there. They could just buy the property from me on a contract for deed for $500 a month. So it's even less than their lot rent. And they can just move their trailer to that property and they're going to own the land in 4 years from now. So kind of like those two different types. Um, and then your second question was
About have you ever purchased land and then possibly, I don't know what the scenario may be, but lease it to somebody and make cash flow that way?
yeah, so that's a cool point because I forgot about this. So one thing I do with the properties, in between buying and selling, or once I bought them and selling them, is I put them on Airbnb as campsites. So it's, I have 90 days or so if I've got the driveway in, or a lot of times I buy them with driveways. If I have that, I'm able to put it on Airbnb as a campsite. People can pull in, put their camper there, go tent camping. I'm only getting $20 to $40 a night off of it. But when you have 20 or 30 properties and they're on Airbnb, like it adds up as a nice side income, as kind of like a in between process of when you're selling it. Uh,
Yeah.
that's one thing I do. Some people, generally because my properties are smaller, it doesn't work as the best for hunting, but it does work sometimes. Like I have properties that adjoin like state land where there's a couple hundred acres of state property. So those work good for hunting. So I do have people that rent it out to go hunting on. And I actually got an email last week from somebody who their kid was going to college in the area and couldn't find an apartment. So that he was going to live in his camper on the property and rent it out from me. Um, he ended up getting the apartment, so didn't end up needing it from me. But yeah, I've had a lot of opportunities to lease it out as well. So there are other income options.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting. What about development? Have you done any development on any of the lands, and how difficult is that to do, and how long is that to do?
Yeah, I haven't fully developed anything yet, but besides like that base level, that is one thing going to work on this summer is getting some Airbnbs up, tiny house Airbnb specifically, because those can be very cheap to put together. Where I already get the land for a couple $1,000s, and if I can buy a tiny house, put it on the property, and then connect it to utilities, I could have a fully running Airbnb for $20,000 invested, and I own it outright. So everything's 100% cash flow from there. So I have one property picked out that it already has utilities on it. Um, and now I just have to get the tiny house on. So that's something I'll probably be doing in the next month or so.
Nice. And the utilities, if it doesn't have utilities, how long does that take? And is that very expensive to do?
Yeah, it depends where the property is and where the utilities are. The nice thing about a lot of states where there's water, unlike here, is you can drill a well you could do a well yourself in Michigan or Minnesota, and that could cost you $1,000, whereas here a well could cost you, I don't know, $30,000 or more to do. So you can get a well for pretty cheap, depending where you are. The septic system is, it depends on how nice of a system you use or if you have a holding tank. So that could be a range. If you're doing a holding tank from like a couple $1,000s up to a full septic system where you're spending $20,000-$30,000, I go for the cheaper option. And then electric is just kind of like the last big expense, because that just depends where the hookup is. If the hookup is at the road or a couple hundred feet, then you're just looking at a couple $1,000s. If it's half a mile away, you're not going to get electric unless you're spending $40,000-$50,000. So electric is kind of like the one holdback factor. The other things you can do on your own.
Okay.
So what advice would you have for someone who wants to get started land flipping? For our listeners here that say, hey, I want to do this, where do they start?
Yeah. First, start by watching my YouTube video. And then I'd say don't rush into buying any deal. Make sure that you're buying it below market price. Like, you want to buy a super cheap piece of land, because if you're doing that, you don't want to have your first deal go wrong and lose money on it. So don't rush into it. Just keep looking for a good deal and do it off market. You can make money on market. You could find deals on market, and especially if you're selling it on contract for deed, make money with those interest payments. But do it off market, because you're going to get a way better deal and you're going to make more money that way. So I just say be really safe with your investments and make sure you're looking for the best deal possible.
Yeah.
Do you ever do any driving for deals, like when you're back in Minnesota and you're in vacation in a certain area, or driving around looking and say, hey, I want to reach out to these people?
I've definitely done that. I've drove by properties. The cool thing about Landglide is you can just like open it up and it shows you on the map like where you are with the parcels around you. So I've been like in cool areas before. I'm like, oh, this is kind of like a nice area. I wonder if there's any parcels that are like an acre in size that I'd be willing to buy. And then I open up the app and it's like, oh, there are some acre parcels here. And then I put offers on it. I haven't necessarily intentionally driven for dollars, because you're just looking at trees at that point. But if you're familiar with an area, and that's something I've got better at, is being able to look at a map and be able to tell like, oh, I know this is probably going to be like pine trees area, or this is going to be like deciduous trees, or kind of this can be marshy. Understanding like what you're looking at. You can do most of the stuff from a computer, which is nice.
Yeah.
How many deals do you think you've done, or do you know exactly like how many you flipped at this point?
I don't know right now. So I've definitely grown in the last year and a half. Has been like where I've done the most deals, and now I'm up to the point where I'm doing about a deal a week, I'd say on average. So I'll probably do about 50 to 60 this year. It's probably going to be my number.
Nice. And this type of model is not affected by the market, is it?
No, that's the cool thing, is because you have both the high and low income earners, where if somebody needs a place to live, then you have that person. And then if you have somebody who has a lot of extra money, then there's buying the lake property. So it does have and because everybody's a cash buyer or a owner financing, like interest rates don't really have too much in play on what you're doing. So it is pretty separate from the rest of the market.
What do you think is holding you back from scaling this up? Like, what's stopping you from doing 100 deals in a year?
It's definitely mindset. Dave Ramsey has affected me. It's just a lot of Um, I'd say it has one money because I do everything with my own cash. I only want to buy the best deals. I want to make sure I'm getting the best value on those deals that I'm doing. So that's definitely one factor where over time it's been snowballing. As I make more money on each property, I have more money to invest into more. So it will get up to 100 deals as I snowball more money, but I only have so much to invest right now. So money is a factor. And then mm, it's, yeah, just generally being risk adverse. I don't have too much money tied up at one time if I can help it. So that's why using other people's money, I think, is going to be like the next big step for me, because I'll be able to buy more deals and not have to worry about it as much. Might be able to get a little slimmer margin, or not slim, but not always have to have a home run on every deal, because I'll be able to still make profit for both of us that will be acceptable.
Where do you see the future of land contract flipping going? And is there any tools that you can use other than LandGlide to really automate this and get more deals going?
Yeah, I'd say overall, I think in real estate, if you want to make money, you have to be doing something that other people aren't doing. So going back in the past, flipping houses was kind of like the cool thing. I don't know, before my time. And that's how people started doing real estate. Then wholesaling kind of became like the popular thing to do, where, oh, you can flip a house with no money down. And now it's kind of like the creative financing is kind of the popular thing. Buying something subject to, or owner financing is kind of the popular thing. So land isn't really popular right now. And I think if you're doing something that isn't popular, that's kind of where you're going to be able to make the most money, because you have less competition and just other people aren't doing it. So maybe eventually it will catch on as something more popular. But I know there's a few people who do land flipping, and it's not really that popular of a thing right now. I think it is because it does take some money, and the sales cycle is a little bit longer, um, where a lot of people don't have like the patience to do it and to keep snowballing it up to where you're making a lot of money. Um, but if you have a good amount of cash already, and if you have other types of investments in real estate, it is like a good complementary business. Um, so I think in the future it could become more popular, but as long as if you're doing something that other people aren't doing, that's where you're going to make the most money. Like one thing I've been looking into is house moving. So moving houses from other properties onto properties. So I have a bunch of vacant land. If I had a house on it, it'd be worth a lot more money. You can buy vacant houses. You can buy houses that are able to be moved for like nothing. Like a lot of people, they'll have a smaller house on their property, and you can get that house moved for $40,000 is in moving costs onto your property. So if I'm able to buy a property for a couple $1,000s, move a house onto it for $30,000, hook it up with utilities, another 10,000, all in, I'm like $40,000 into a property, and I have a house on it now. It's going to be able to sell it for a lot more money than what I paid for it. And I don't know too many people who do stuff like that. I know some people do it, but it's like a very unique type of real estate or weird thing that other people aren't doing. And that's where I think you can make money if you're different than other people. So
Yeah.
yeah.
And being that this is able to be done remotely, have you traveled anywhere in Europe or anything like that while on your laptop just doing deals?
I haven't done Europe for a while, but yeah, I travel a lot. I'm only in Vegas like maybe half the month. The other 2 weeks, yeah, for like half the month I'm home, half the month I'm traveling. So
Nice.
yeah, I'm gone pretty often.
So you're on the beach doing this.
I was in LA last 2 weeks ago, and then where was I? I was on a cruise a couple weeks before that. Yeah, I don't know. I'm always going somewhere. So
Is there what do you follow as far as sources or other guys doing higher level to get the trends or anything like that that are changing in this whole game for you?
I never started looking into other people doing land until like really like a couple months ago.
Yeah.
So it's good and bad because again, like being unique, I do stuff a little bit differently than other people that I have seen who are doing it, just because I never had like somebody that I followed that was doing it. So I always did stuff a little bit differently than other people. And I couldn't name anybody by name that does it. I know there's a ton of people that do it, but I don't follow anybody really specifically. I just kind of watch what other people are doing just to try to get an idea of if there's anything else that I could add into my business. But I couldn't recommend anybody right now.
Okay.
I have. I haven't bought them on terms from a private seller before, but sometimes different counties will sell properties, tax forfeit properties on a contract. So I have done that. I bought it from the county on a contract for deed, and I had a 10% interest rate on those properties, and I bought those at I think like a year and a half ago. So interest rates were a bit lower, but 10% on like a $9,000 purchase price wasn't too bad, and it was just kind of in between while I was looking for somebody to buy the property. I only had to put down, I think, $1,000 on it. So it was about 10%. So yeah, I think it was like $900 that I put down, and then a 10% interest rate, pay it off anytime. So I have bought it on terms, but not from a private seller, just because it's a headache to explain that, I think, to people when I can just pay cash and get it for a lower price anyways.
I agree.
Right. So you're dealing with less expensive properties. So just pay for it cash, get it over with.
Mm-hmm.
It would be nice though, get something on terms and keep it for 2 weeks and put your small down payment on and flip to somebody else.
Yeah. If somebody really was tight on money where they don't have $3,000 to buy a property, terms would be a good case scenario. And I think too, if you're really dealing with bigger number properties, so if you're buying those lake properties, or if you're buying bigger parcels, or if you're in a more populated area where prices go higher, terms would make sense to do it like that. Just in my market, it doesn't.
And you said that you've really ramped up in the last year and a half. Is there anything that you wish you could do differently? Like if you were 18 again and you knew what you know today, is there anything you would have done differently on your way up?
Yeah, I guess if I could do something differently, it would, one, probably start using other people's money instead of just using my own cash. But again, there's more risk with that. So I'd say at least start like your first couple deals, do it on your own, limit your risk. Once you at least know what you're doing, then maybe start using other people's money, take a little bit more risk. So doing that, and then kind of just like trusting the process. At first, you kind of have that like analysis paralysis where you only want to buy the best deal, and you're searching around looking for everything for a long time before you actually pull the trigger and buy it. Now it's kind of just like, for me, it's pretty nonchalant. Like, oh yeah, it's a cool property. I'll buy that. I'll close on it. And just kind of, it's a lot easier to do since I've got used to it. So if I had that mindset a couple years ago, where it's like, oh, I know this is going to be a good deal, and I'll buy it pretty nonchalantly without having to go through a lot of research into it and making sure every single thing is perfect about it. That's like the other thing I'd change. But again, I think that just comes with experience. Like if I didn't have that kind of like being scared of making a bad decision, I might have made a bad purchase at some point and lost money on it. So it's kind of like a double-edged sword where you want to make the right decisions, but you also want to have a little bit more risk to make more money. So that's what I'd say.
I have one more.
Just whatever risk tolerance you're comfortable with.
Yeah, exactly.
My question is, for the audience that may be seeing that may want to be or want to deploy their money with you, what if you've already thought about it, what kind of returns could they possibly see with you? And we'll give them, your contact information as far as Instagram and YouTube, if they ever did want to contact you for that.
Yeah. I don't know if this would be the best place for people to invest, because I'm going to offer interest rates that are better than other investments, but still not, you're not going to be getting 3x on your money, like you could if you did it on your own. So if you're a real estate investor, do it on your own because you're going to make more money. But if you're a doctor, you're an attorney, and you have a lot of extra cash that you want to invest, like the proposal that I wrote right now, on a 5-year investment, you'd make around 13% annual return, which is pretty good. But then there's also the big selling point is if a property sells for cash, you're going to have a huge return on your first year. So you don't have to have a 5-year investment, where 13% annualized over 5 years is if it's on a contract for deed, you're going to be getting that return. But if those properties end up selling for cash, which I don't know, it depends on the situation. If we have a cash buyer, then there's a good chance that you're going to get like a 30 or 40% return in the first year. So it's just kind of like that risk that you have. You're low end, you're still going to make a good return. 10 to 15% is about like the average is what you'd be getting. But then there's a good chance that in the first year, one of those properties might sell for cash and you'll get 20 or 30 or 40%, depending on what it sells for. So that's what I'd say. And if you're interested in something like that, just message me on Instagram.
Okay.
Yeah, come on, algorithm, do your thing. Send us in front of the right people. All right.